Hi there, it's Ken Lavalette, Woodwind Yachts once again. Happy to be asked to participate in the 2023 spring tour for the ACBS. Here at Woodwind Yachts, we've got lots on the go, as we're going to find out. But first, I just wanted to mention that in my life, I've set my sights pretty high and my goals pretty high. And in June of 1983, I decided to start a wooden boat restoration shop and name it Woodwind Yachts. And back then I thought, wouldn't it be something if I could properly restore and refinish 500 wooden boats? And I just wanted to mention that this year we're going to make the 400 mark. So here we are, 40 years, 400 boats, and we're still going strong. So again, welcome to Woodwind Yachts. I'm going to give you a quick tour of what we're doing in the shop. We're going to start with this little boat right here. It's a 1953 15-foot piece of junk. I'm sorry, that was my inside voice. I have to speak with my outside voice here. This is the 1953 Peterborough Classic Cedar Strip runabout. And what we're going to do with this is completely restore the boat, of course. That's why she's here. We're right now taking the old fiberglass off the bottom of the boat. We are going to remove and replace between 40 and 45 steam bent ribs in this boat. She's going to get a new keel, new bilge keels, new splash rails, new transom, some planking, partial decks, and then a complete refinish. And we're hoping to have her in the water. Now, all this work is going to take approximately 6 or 7 months to perform. And by my calculations, that should put us right about just in time for fall haul out. Come on, let's go see the next boat that we've got here in the shop. Here we have a nice little 1953 15-foot Richardson cedar strip outboard runabout. She came in for a bunch of work. What we've done here is we've replaced about approximately a dozen, maybe 11 or 12 full ribs in the boat, and we've scarf repaired about another 10 or 12 ribs in the boat. She's got a new stem and a new keel and a new transom. When the old rotten keel came out of the boat, that gives us access to some of the cracks in some of these ribs. This rib, for example, wasn't rotted, it was just broken underneath the old keel. So when the old keel was removed out of the way, then we could nicely scarf in a piece here, as we've done here and here and here as well. It was my opinion there was no point in replacing the whole rib when there was nothing structurally wrong with the rib except it was broken right underneath the original keel. This also enables us to cut the costs for the customer a little bit. By doing this on a boat like this, we might save $500, $600, $700. And it's perfectly good and strong repair. And we've also added 4 coats of epoxy along with 1 layer of cloth to the exterior of the boat to give it extra strength as well and to keep the boat watertight when he uses it. Anyway, there you go, nice little boat. We're hoping to have it finished for Gravenhurst. Next we have a nice little 1955 Lake Craft cedar strip runabout. We've done a complete restoration on this little boat. She's had a new stem, new inner and outer keels. She's got new garboard planks, as you can see down in the bilge here. She's got about 30 new ribs or scarf repaired ribs. The decks, of course, had to come off the boat to do the restoration work, so we've just recently put the decks back down here. The original decks we've repaired as best we could. The original decks. The inside now has 7 coats of varnish. We've just put the seats back in this week. They're going to get their final coat of varnish in the boat. And currently, right now, we are sanding and varnishing the decks in wales and out wales, bringing it to 7 coats. The bottom has been epoxied with 4 coats of epoxy and 1 layer of 6-ounce cloth, and it's going to be painted red. There you go. Here I'm standing behind one of our new Nomads. This is a replica 15-foot Peterborough cedar strip runabout. Many of you have seen our boats displayed on land at the Gravenhurst Boat Show over the years. This is the next one that we're building now. Brand new boat. We've just taken it off the mold. The mold is very, very heavy duty, and we build the boat upside down over top of the mold. This week we have taken the hull off the mold, and now we're going to start to finish the hull from here. You can see that there's a lot of nails protruding through the planking and the ribs. These are now going to be snipped to the proper length and then clenched over, much the same as Peterborough, exactly the same way Peterborough built their boats back in the 40s, 50s, and so on. You can see here we've got a new laminated oak stem. We've got a new laminated oak outer stem. This has been bent on a jig. It's going to fit right in there like that when it's all finished. We have some of the deck beams have been made for the boat already, and some of the floor frames, but we're hoping to, we were originally hoping to have this boat ready for Gravenhurst this year, but it looks like probably going to have her ready for Gravenhurst next year. You'll see it then. Back again. We have 3 sailboats in the shop. This is the little one, we have a medium-sized one, and we have a big one. So we'll start with the little one. This is a 1935 14-foot Ackroyd sailboat. Nice little boats. We've restored over a dozen of these little boats. Most of the fleet have gone to Stony Lake, where they have an active racing fleet there. Lovely little boat. What you got here was 4 ribs in the forward end of the boat that were bad. She got new garboard planks and miscellaneous repairs. You can see that we've taken the decks off the boat to enable us to do the repairs. We saved the original decks, and we're going to repair them and put the original decks from 1935 back on the restored boat. Right now, of course, we don't want anything in the interior because we're priming and painting the inside. The interior of this boat was originally painted, and so we had really no choice but to paint it again. It's going to end up like an off-white, like a buff or a cream color when she's finished. We've had to build a new centerboard trunk that's going to fit right down here in the slot, as you can see. And this is the new board that we've built. The steel centerboard will go inside there and slide up and down that. It should be able to scratch it and ding it all the heck. And of course the dog will have its way with the boat as well. But these are fun little boats to restore. Nice and easy to work on, right down on the floor. And they're really cute little boats. Fun to sail too, fun to sail. We've had to build a new centerboard trunk for this nice little Ackroyd. It's built out of solid cedar, same as the original. You can see some of the detail work right here. There's a steel centerboard that's going to slide up and down here, and it's got 2 3/4 inch diameter pins on either side of the board. They will slide up and down and ride on this brass reinforcing that's been all inset prior to assembly. That's going to look really nice in this little boat. Lastly, we have a lovely old 1932 20-foot Gidley launch owned by one of the members of our club. We call him Mr. Midget, not because he's vertically challenged much like myself, but because he specializes in the restoration of Buchanan midget engines. Anyway, one of his works is going to go into this boat and power this boat when we're finished. This is a true extensive restoration. We are trying to save, I figure we're saving between 10 and 20% of the original boat. And the boat has always looked like a boat during the restoration process, so it is a true extensive restoration. We've replaced the stem, the keel, which turns into the skeg as you move aft. Every rib, every steam bent oak rib in the boat has been replaced. Most of the deck frames have been replaced. Every plank on the outer hull, she's been completely replanked. The decks are new. What we are saving to account for the 15-20% is we've saved the original transom. We've saved some of the original seats and a couple of the original forward frames underneath the forward deck and the fuel tank supports, along with little bits and pieces. But other than that, she's basically a new boat. So we're hoping to have her ready, believe it or not. It's half past March now. We're hoping to have her ready for the Gravenhurst Boat Show, displayed on land, so you can see our newest works then. So hope to see you with this little baby in Gravenhurst.
Well, hi, welcome to Brackley Boats, and we have a few interesting things on the go here. This boat here is a 1935 Chris Craft Custom that I believe a gentleman in the States had started work on it, and he'd done a bunch of work to it. They put a new bottom on it. They did very good work, but I think he's run out of time, and he ended up selling the boat, and our customer bought it, and so now we're going to finish the work. Well, this boat came and it was they had already done the refinishing part for the most part. Some interior woodwork still wasn't stripped yet. The deck had about 4 or 5 coats of varnish on it, and so we've started varnishing it. The challenge that we've had is that if we had stripped it, we would have done a lot more filling of chip plugs and things. So there was a lot of chip plugs and open seams and stuff that should have been filled prior. So we're filling it now, and it's just a little more time consuming than it would have been if we had filled it from the start. So there's a lot of like little open seams and stuff in the decking, and we've had to fill it with either clear epoxy or varnish. But it's coming nicely, and it's going to be a really, really pretty boat when it's done. And in a moment I'll show you the engine. Was mainly refinishing and assembly. The boat arrived with right full to the top with parts and seats and gunnels and mechanical items, and it was completely disassembled. So we were kind of doing a bit of forensic work here to try and put it back together and then take it apart again, so we know that we have everything. And it's coming together now. And on this side we have a Gravette streamliner that we're replacing the deck on, and we're repowering as well. And it'll also be refinished, and I have to have it done for Father's Day, so I've got a lot of work to do between now and then. Now this is the Chris Craft A120. This is the second A120 that we've worked on. Don't come across them very often. It's a V8. I think it's very heavy. I'm pretty sure it weighs around 1,500 pounds, although I can't verify that, but it is heavy. And it's about 250 horsepower from what we've read, and 13.5 liters. And so she's a monster. And we just had it running. I can't run it right now because it needs a fuel pump, but as soon as we get that, we'll be running it again shortly. And it does run nice. I don't know what work's been done to it, but it's been sitting for 7 years in cold storage. And the gentleman that owned it prior, he's fairly elderly, and I haven't been able to talk to him too much. But I'll find out more as we get this beast running. Hopefully we'll be putting it in the boat here shortly. We're hoping to have this boat at the boat show. So as long as everything comes together and there's no surprises. And so far it's been pretty good. So this is a 1947 26-foot Gravette streamliner. And we have been hired we're going to refinish the boat, number one. We're going to repower the boat. He's putting a V12 in it, actually. And it's a modern V12. It's called a Falconer racing engine. It's based on a Chevy small block, but it's a 12-cylinder. And I don't have any pictures to show you, and I don't have the engine. I wish I did have the engine because it's quite impressive. And we are, this boat actually was one of the very first, well, this would be the first major restoration I was involved in 1987 when I worked for Butson's. And Stan Hunter and I put the bottom on it at that time, and the bottom is still good, and and so I'm happy about that. That I don't have to replace something that we've done years ago, so it's still in good shape. And we're also, I think I mentioned, but we're redoing the decking, and we're changing the cockpit a little bit, and I'll show you at the back of the boat a little bit more deck work back there. So one of the things the new owner wants to do is he wants to put a hatch on the aft cockpit. So I'm building a 3-piece hatch, and the first layers are going to be it's marine plywood, very thin, lots of laminates. There's 4 laminates of 1/8" marine plywood here, and the only reason I'm doing that is because it's such a large hatch. I don't want anything to move. I want it very stable, because if I just did a standard 5/8 thick deck, it might move on me, and I can't have that. It's got to stay nice and flush, so the plywood's going to stabilize it. And then after the plywood's laminated, I have the first layer on this one. There's 3 more to go. Those ones are done. I will laminate a veneer of mahogany on the top, which will be about 5/16 thick, and then ferret it all into the deck, and it'll look just like everything else that's here. And he just wanted it to he likes the streamlined look of the boat, so he wants it to look even more streamlined. It's going to be a very, very slick boat when it's done. And we're going to change the stain color as well. It's going to be a little bit lighter. I always thought this boat was a little dark, and it's going to go a little bit lighter. So it's going to be a whole new boat when it's done. So this is I'm not sure the year, but it's a 23-foot Lapstrake Duke from Lake of Bays. And last spring, a customer phoned, and he had some advanced rot up here, essentially, in the garboard planks. And so I was expecting it to be really, really bad. But it's turned out to not be too bad. The rot was very localized in just a couple of planks. We had to replace the stem here, a section of the stem. And we found 6 planks that need replaced, but the rest of the boat is pristine. We're quite happy. We did a little repair to get them through last season. We actually put a plate of plywood over it and smeared a bunch of bedding on it to get them through the season. And it worked just fine, but now we're dealing with the issue, so we'll have it fixed right up for this season. And so Lapstrake, this one's been screwed and not riveted. It's got some rivets in it, but it's had a bottom at some point. But it was cedar, and the cedar now is kind of questionable, and we have had problems with cedar where it'll have localized rot, and not rampant, but one plank will just be completely shot, and that's exactly what happened here. And you can see on the other side of the boat, these garboard planks have a lot of twists, so they essentially flat at the stem, and then they go to flat in the bottom. And they're difficult to steam on the boat, so we tended to steam them. We make a jig up and just put a twist in the plank. That one's been steamed for a few days now. Ron Butson always told me mahogany's got a memory, and it likes to go back. So we over steam it, so it's got more twist than we need. And we leave it on this jig for as long as you can. So we like to get these planks sitting there for like a week before we go to use them. Just trivia, but it's kind of interesting. And they will take quite a bit of twist. We soak them first, and we are using, as I mentioned, we're using mahogany on this instead of the cedar for the few planks that we're doing. And yeah, we're quite happy with this project. It's going to be done soon and back in the water.
My name is Jeff Breen, and this is my father Peter, and he started this business, Breen Boats, about 45 years ago. We're located in Rockwood, Ontario. It's 30 minutes west of Toronto. And yeah, this is our boat shop, and we'll be showing you all our projects today and showing you around. This is a early 1930s Gravette triple cockpit, 30 foot. So it came to us as what we would call a gray boat or a wreck. At this point in time, you know, when you come across one 100 years old-ish, there's, you know, everything's oil soaked, rotten. Basically came in as one piece. We still have all the decks. Everything was kind of taken apart by a previous owner who started the restoration, but found it was way beyond their scope. Anyway, basically the same as the other restorations in the shop, same process, but a little more in-depth because you're starting with less. So each frame taken off the original like gray boat, one at a time, exactly replaced, put on a board so I make everything flow perfectly. And then each frame goes on a new backbone because the original was way too bent and twisted to possibly jig up. So at that point, get all your frames flowing. You'll see the transom, same thing. We've replaced that kind of meticulously piece by piece. Get all those on your new backbone, keel, everything flowing perfectly as it was originally. And then, yeah, same process, chine set in, subframes every 8 inches between the main frames, solid mahogany planking, same thing they did in the 20s. 30s, yeah. Basically no wet system, no laminates, everything solid planks, the exact same way it was built. The only difference is we seal it better than they did. They only had, you know, paint and caulking, whereas today we have epoxy, and it's just a maintenance-free way of doing it while keeping with the traditional construction method. So you'll see some more details. So yeah, this gives you an idea of the restoration process, what I would call a forensic restoration. Every piece of this boat, like I said, the last owner took off and disassembled and started the process. So as we go to document each piece, like this for instance shows us where the water line will be, etc. And when I was basically plotting out my plank widths to start the side process, I referenced these planks to see what they had done, and we want to make it, you know, as perfect, authentic as we can as we go. So that's one example of taking a piece out, documenting everything, and then at the end, all this stuff, what we can't use will get destroyed. A lot of this wood, you can't use it for non-structural components like a hull and stuff. It loses all of its integrity, structural integrity. So stuff like this will plane up. Things like the interior firewalls, you know, some of the seating and stuff where you can add it in and make the original patina kind of jump out at you. It all kind of helps, you know, add to the authenticity, and, you know, it just works out that way. So as I was saying, when we replace each kind of frame at a time, eventually we got back to the transom. And so this took quite a bit of, you know, configuring and time to create. You'll see on the boat itself. But basically what we have is a 12-inch curve, which is, we've never done one quite that big. We just did our first steam bent plank on it. And yeah, you just start with one piece at a time, replicate it, take all your measurements, make sure everything's bang on original. And yeah, just go from there. Like pieces like this kind of show where everything has been. This is our original rudder piece. So they streamlined the rudders kind of in the 30s, and all the internal stuff is in the transom to all the mechanism, kind of a cleaner look. All you have is the rudder on the outside with this plate. Anyway, everything, there's the hole for it there. So as I said, with all the original pieces, we can document, you know, where everything goes as we get to that stage. So this is the restored transom on the boat. Yeah, you can see how everything, each piece was kind of put in at a time, like uprights first, and then it's kind of a complicated process looking back on it, but yeah, you just, the boat kind of tells you what to do as you're building it. Like these curves, huge tumble home here is meeting the 12-inch curve, so I had to do a bunch of block work just to make it all structural at the corner, and everything's got enough strength. Anyway, when that's all done, so now I'm on the planking process. Because it's a 12-inch bend, we knew we had to achieve this bend somehow. We're kind of worried about it because steam bending mahogany isn't as easy as oak usually. We have a lot more experience doing oak. That being said, pick the right straight grain, keep it in the steam box long enough, and because we've done a lot of steam bending, we have an idea of, you know, the process and how to work it on. And luckily this first board went on seamlessly, and we can just hope the next 4 will be the same, and yeah, go from there. This is a full-size mock-up of our engine, and in this case it's a Elmore 430. So we've never actually had one of these before. In the past we've made a template out of plywood and put your driveline on it and do the best you can. This is just another example of where you try and find better ways of doing things, because the engine supplier was able to give us this full-size thing. We're able to have it printed out, which gives us the exact driveline, and from there get the engine sitting exactly where we want in the boat, usually as low as possible, because that increases, you know, the efficiency of the hull. Energy is getting transmitted straight ahead. So from there I put my string line on before I had the bottom on, and then I find out exactly where my hole wants to go through the hull, and then I just basically start making that hole as tight as I can for the carbon fiber shaft log, get that installed, and then it's kind of done until on the other end when the engine goes in. But at that point you're not guessing later, everything's been done beforehand, so it's just a good way of doing it. This is our carbon fiber shaft log installation. So once I have that all set into the boat, at the end when the driveline all gets installed, this piece simply fits over here, and those hose clamps go up snug. Then your shaft goes through. There's a little clearance on here. This fits the shaft tight, and then when you slide this back, it has O-rings in it. You slide it back, and then they tell you to put 3/4 to 1 inch of pressure, which just compresses these little baffle things. And what that does is holds pressure against it and basically makes it a dripless carbon shaft log, what they say. This piece here grabs water from the engine, and that just cools this joint so this can't overheat. And yeah, my dad's been using these for 40 years and basically never had an issue. Just, it's a spot of the boat where they've always tended to leak in old boats with all the packing and whatnot, and all the bolt holes going through the keel. We don't have any of that, so it's one of those spots where we eliminate maintenance. So that's that. Here you can see our carbon fiber shaft log exiting the hull. So basically everything is, tight fit into the keel, and then everything's sealed so there's no area for water to get in. From that point, the shaft will go out at as low of an angle as we could, just as was originally done. So that mock-up of the engine, that's what that helps us to do, is get it as low in the boat and then keep this as low. So you're not wasting all the energy on a huge angle like some of the originals were done, just because they happen to have a 14-inch high strut, and they just bolted it on the boat and used it. They didn't necessarily put a lot of thought into these things all the time. So yeah, it's just an area where we can make things as smooth and efficient running as we can. So this is a new build. We call it the ducktail race boat. Again, we started a couple years ago in between other jobs. We try and keep a couple of these things around just so that we have no downtime. Not having to paint floors, you can always throw a guy on, something, do value added activity. So yeah, this is a 26.5 foot gentleman's racer. Currently the hull's all done, sealed in and out, engine installed, driveline all hooked up. Basically all the main rigging is done. We try and do that before the decking and stuff, so you're not working around everything. It's just, over the years we found the most efficient ways of doing things. So yeah, it's at a point now where it'll sit until someone buys it, and at that point the decking and stuff, there's still a lot of different configurations and options, so it's pretty customizable still. And yeah, that's where it sits now. So this shows the ducktail design I mentioned. So It's reminiscent of boats like B4, kind of the early 20s Ditchburns. We've done Margaret Shirley, a different one that came up and in, whereas this one comes up vertical. It's just more of a historic look. So to give how we do things is the same way they did in the 20s. Everything's make a wood pattern, get it fitting as good as you can, get it sent it to the casting shop. They cast it out of bronze. When you get that piece back, it's always going to be a rough casting, so you get as much of your fitting done with the wood as you can, but knowing that the bronze is going to be imperfect too. So once you get the bronze back, fit it perfectly up to the boat. Top and bottom are always a little different. Once you get that rough fit, rough cleaned up, machine the holes, get the bolts through, get them sitting on there tight. Then you worry about this hole, getting this pin perfectly aligned. Once you get that kind of dremelled out, you get your rudder sitting on there, and at that point you got this lengthways rod and your rudder, and you just got to figure out the perfect length for this guy to make it work, so you got as much right turn as left, or vice versa. And the last piece is hooking this guy up, getting it through your hull. It's kind of a patient process, one little task at a time. So this is a hand-drawn rendering of this boat, kind of bill drawings I would call them. So my dad drew this up, basically took the measurements, made all my framework and whatnot, and yeah, it's everything we've done as a company is based off proven hull designs. Miss APBA Rainbow 3, kind of two examples, where my dad has taken those hull designs, done slight modifications, but keeping everything balanced. You know, engine placement, everything's done based off a proven original, so we're not taking a huge gamble with, you know, huge money. So when someone buys a boat, they have an idea of, you know, this thing's going to run as flawlessly as it looks. So this just gives an idea of a deck layout. Still can be customized by, you know, the buyer, but this kind of just gives an idea, you know, certain things like front cockpit. Usually people like that for practicality. It gives you, you know, 2 extra capacity people, 2 or 3. But things like that, you could get rid of that, make it more sleek. And the windshield, you can obviously do a wooden windshield, kind of Muskoka style, or do like a glass 3-piece metal windshield. So there's lots of things to customize at this point, and yeah, those are just a couple examples. That's the same thing as my piece for the back. That's a wooden cutwater cast pattern. So each boat obviously is a little different, so you always have to make a pattern for each one, and that's the guy for this. Okay. This is a 1989 Hackercraft 22-foot gentleman's racer. So it was, the boats of this era were very kind of infamous for their bottoms rotting off in a pretty short amount of time. Anyway, this boat was owned by Sandy Kennedy for a bunch of years and was a regular at a lot of the boat shows, especially in Muskoka. A customer of ours bought it around 7-8 years ago and had us put a Breen encapsulated bottom in it. At the same time, we stripped everything, new deck grout, and then added a bunch of kind of Muskoka-esque features, including the scoops on the engine hatches, gunnel rails, a bunch of the hardware, some wood around the cockpit. As my dad was mentioning, like things like the gunnel rails, like the time involved with doing that, you know, they could probably put another one of their laminated decks on, like for the time it took them building. So it's kind of the small details that, you know, take the time and you don't necessarily notice when they're done, but if you saw the boat before and after, you'd really realize the difference. And anyway, now this boat, because that customer bought a bigger boat for his expanding family, this thing just sold and it's heading to Lake Hopatchong, New Jersey. So it'll kind of enter its next chapter, kind of near where it's from, being a Hackercraft. So it's kind of an exciting new stage. This is a 1962 22-foot gauge hacker from Geneva Lake, Wisconsin. So it's kind of a typical boat that was in the same family for like 40-50 years. This guy's dad bought it new. And typical of these old boats, the bottom kind of had been fixed and repaired numerous times. came to us with a couple holes in it. The guy realized that it was kind of finally beyond repair. So he's ready to kind of bite the bullet on a new bottom. So you can see now all the old bottom has slowly been removed frame by frame. We replaced one frame at a time, tied into the original sides. Everything gets like epoxied and bolted together. Once all the frames have been replaced, the old bottom removed, the keel, chine gets set in to tie those frames together. Lastly, the subframes, which go every 8 inches between the 24-inch main frames, go in to give it extra support. And then that's where we are now. We're halfway done with the subframes, so they'll fill in up there. Then at that point, we're ready to do our final fairing, and then the planking begins. So in about 3 or 4 months, it'll be enclosed, and we'll probably have it mostly faired, so it'll be on the mends and looking like a boat again. This is a 1928 36-foot Ditchburn. So last winter, unfortunately, it had a storage building collapse take place, and basically the whole front deck was more or less demolished. So I guess the only positive side would be that the hull, interior, back deck, seating, basically none of that was really touched. And yeah, so at this point I've kind of got all the frames replaced, all the king plank, engine room molding, all the framework done. So at this point it'll really take shape quick. It's just a matter of getting all the deck stripping on, which everything's 5/8 thickness, solid mahogany strip, edge nailed, the exact same way they did in the 20s. And yeah, it'll start taking shape, and I'm sure the customer will feel better when the deck's on, and by the end of this summer we hope to have some stain on it. So yeah, it's an exciting stage as well. This is a 26-foot Ditchburn launch out of the 1920s. Extremely original boat. I think it had a new bottom at one point, 30 years ago or so. Anyway, a couple of years ago, a customer of ours acquired it, and we just did some kind of touch up, moved the tanks, new upholstery, some hardware here and there, kind of cosmetic things. He also repowered it. It had an old Babbitt bearing original thing, and we put kind of a classic repower straight 8 Chrysler in it. So turnkey reliability, but you get that kind of throaty old engine look and sound. Anyway, since then he's kind of moved on, and this boat has just sold, and it's on its way to Balsam Lake. So currently we got a cradle made, and my dad is fitting bunks up that'll fully support it lengthways so that it's at ease as much out of the water as in, or just about. And that way it's fully supported, and you can't have anything come loose. So yeah, this thing will go in a week or two to its new home on Balsam Lake, and the next chapter.
Hello and welcome to my shop. My name's Jeff Titrell, and we're presently in sunny and beautiful Lake Dalrymple. At this shop we do primarily the vintage marine and hot rod engines, more like the one behind me here. However, we also get some of the late model marine. We do dabble in a little bit of late model automotive, but we try to stick to some of the cooler stuff. We recently did a turboed BMW motor, so we like to dabble with that stuff. We actually have a Mitsubishi Eclipse turbo motor coming in here shortly, so we'll play with some of the fun stuff, but our main core stuff is the marine stuff that you see here. This one came in yesterday, the 3-liter we were running, and this I just pulled out of the boat that I was that's right behind you. You can't see it, but yeah, so this is our shop, and we've been nice and busy this year. There's been a lot of projects coming and going. I've been filming some stuff throughout, so you'll get to see some of the machining processes, and you'll hear me mention quite a few times Patrick Keefe and Antique Marine. When it gets into the vintage engines, we do a lot of collaboration work with Antique Marine. We share a passion with the vintage boats, and we've done a lot of work together. Patrick's really good at either having or sourcing parts, and has a lot of great contacts and a lot of great knowledge in the area of vintage marine. And over the course of the years, we've become friends, and I look forward to doing some boating with Patrick. He and I both have a boat in process that we hope to have done this year. So looking forward to seeing everybody out on the water, and we hope to keep everybody running smoothly. So welcome to our shop, and we'll get in here and we'll get you a tour of some of the things on the go right now.
Here's a couple of Buchanans. The one on the left is a Buchanan Midget. The one on the right is a Buchanan Junior 4, earlier version. These are both babbited blocks, and they just came back from a line bore. So what happened is the crankshafts were ground. The raw babbitt, which is in here, the raw babbitt was put back in, the shells were put in the block, and these blocks were sent down to another machine shop that had an line bore system, and they have bored that babbitt to my crankshaft dimensions so that we have the proper clearance for running. In doing that, before they went down, I rough bored the cylinders so that I knew what pistons to get ready. We have put new guides for the valves in here, and actually touched the seats for the valves. So the valve job is almost done in both engines, and as you can see by the Midget, we've also installed cam bearings and the cam, all for fitment. So these are well in process. I'll show you some of the parts. These are collaboration. Antique Marine and I build a lot of these together. Patrick's a great source of parts, but he also has great contacts and gets a lot of inquiries on engine builds. So between us, we work together to get these beautiful vintage engines back in the market, in the boats, getting used. So thank you to Patrick. This particular engine here is actually a personal favorite because it's going in my own boat. So this was the original motor out of my recently purchased little Ditchburn, and I am building it to put it back in the Ditchburn so that it has the original motor, and then hopefully in the next week or so I will pull the motor that's out of it, and I have to prepare that one for another boat. So I'm going to be fortunate enough to get the original motor back in my boat, and here it is right here. So here we're looking at parts for not only a Junior 4 but a Midget. As you can see, there's a collection of parts and bearing sizes and new old stock and a crankshaft and some of the housings that have been blasted and cleaned. So again, part of it in process. We take a bunch of pieces in boxes and turn them into a running motor. So this is the Junior 4 that I pulled out of my little Ditchburn, and we're replacing with the original motor. This was a running motor. We just pulled the head quick to do a quick assessment. I believe this engine was assembled here in our shop in 2020 and put in that boat. When I purchased the boat this spring, Patrick Keefe at Antique Marine had my original motor for the boat, so he suggested that I'd be crazy not to rebuild the original and put it back in. So that's what we're doing. We're gonna rebuild and put an original motor, and documented original, by the way, back into the boat, and I am going to probably take this down go through it, check all the components, re-gasket this, repaint it, and this is going to go into a boat down the road through Antique Marine. First cut on a Buchanan Junior 4, just doing a preliminary cut, just to kind of center it out so you can hear it barely touching. I like to do an initial cut just to check the square and then make sure I get my depth all the way before I rough this block to 20 over. Currently standard. When it's done, I'll put it in the home here and we'll finish on it. But this block here is an early Gravette block, so I'm going to rough it so I know what piston size we need. I'm going to go in for Gravette, and I'll come back, put hardened seats in it, deck the surface, and start getting ready for assembly. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is install hardened seats into this Buchanan Junior 4 block. So it is in the machine here. I'm going to step back. This is an IDL head station. IDL was Ingenious Device Limited, and it was manufactured in Orillia, Ontario. I purchased this in BC and had it shipped back. So ironically, this thing's traveled across the country and ended up back almost in its hometown. Anyways, I have started the process. As I come closer here, I will show you. So inside here, you are going to see these rings here. These are the hardened seats. They actually look like this. And we put them in to give the, in this case, give the exhaust a better chance of living with our unleaded fuel, which the exhaust are these smaller ones. The larger are intake valves. I have not done this one yet, as you can see. I am just set up with my cutter here. This is the cutter to cut this one. And I have a depth piece up here, so when I bring this down, you can see the stop there. That stop will give me my depth. I've predetermined that in setting up the machine. The reason I did the intake valve as well is these seats here and here were pitted so bad, and you can see some pitting around the seats here, this pitting here and some here, and it didn't affect, there's a couple little marks in that seat that would have cleaned. But I'm going to, instead of just doing 6 of the 8 valves, we are going to do all 8, which is what I'm going to do here. And it's pretty simple. I'm going to try to do this with a free hand. I should have set up a tripod for this. Just going to get my cutter set in. So I've got my cutter set in. Up here I have for cutting and drilling, and I pick a size for my speed. I am going to turn the unit on. And essentially it's like a giant drill press. And as I lean into it, you can see it's starting to cut here. And we're slowly going to cut. And I have set this cutter to the size because we actually cut the hole smaller than the hardened seat, so that when we put the seat into the block, it goes in with crush, and that helps hold the seat in place. If we put it in loose or with no crush, then when the engine heated up, because it's a different material than the cast iron block, one may expand quicker than the other and the seat could fall out, and that does happen occasionally. I get an engine in here with a failure with no compression in the cylinder, and the seat has fallen out and broken up as the valve has pounded it. But anyways, we're just going nice and slow here, and then I will show you what it looks like like. Okay, so now I've just vacuumed up the mess. I'm going to slide the block over so I can get into it. I'm going to remove the cutter here, and you can see that what I'm left with is a cut hole in the block, and then I am going to use a seat, and not this one. This one hasn't been in the freezer, so I have the seats outside in a snowbank right now, keeping frozen. So this seat is going to go on here, and then we use this, and we use a drift tool that goes down on it, and I hammer it into place. Again, I'll need 2 hands for that, so I will do that process. When I do put it in, I do use red Loctite in behind, as you can see in there. I put the Loctite in behind. It also helps hold it. So I will put the seat in and show you what it looks like. And there we have it. The seat is now installed, and due to the pre-setup, we have no lip at all. It's smooth. Now we can machine the head surface completely across and level everything out if we need to after the fact. But there you have it. That is an installed hardened seat. And then I will touch this surface here slightly to make sure that it's still round. You can see the shiny spot there. That is the angle for the seat. Then I will lap a valve in to make sure that it's touching all the way around, and then we do what we call a vacuum test to make sure that the valves are sealing. On the exhaust, they're individual ports. On the intakes, they are Siamese. In other words, there's one port here, and it goes into both valves. So when I do that, I have to put 2 valves in, and I pull on the port, and it checks both sides at the same time. It's a little more difficult to do, because if you do have one side that's leaking just a little bit on the vacuum test, it's really hard to tell which one it is. There's some tricks. I can show you how to do that. But there's a hardened seat installed for you in a Buchanan Junior 4, which is a Hercules IXB flathead 4-cylinder. And there you go on the side there. IXB 5M for Marine. Okay, there you go. This is one of my own engines. This is going in my own boat this summer. It's a 1934 Buchanan Junior 4. It was one of 2 Junior 4s sold to Ditchburn in 1934. There's this one, and the other Buchanan Junior 4 is in Stan Hunter's family boat. So I know we're both Junior 4s that were sold to Ditchburn in 1934 presently are. So what I was doing yesterday is I was assembling the valve train in here, the springs, the retainers, the keepers, and then setting the valves with the lifters. Tools are pretty straightforward. We have a valve spring compressor, which we would use to compress the springs so I could get the retainers and keepers in. Once we had the valve train in, I will, and I have the advantage here, I do not have the crankshaft or the oil pan in. I can look up underneath here, and I can see when I've got the camshaft lift or the lobe pointing away, and so I'm on the back side, and then I can set my valves properly. So, and this one, intake and exhaust valves are set at 10 thou clearance. So what I need is to be able to get my feeler gauge, and it's just dragging there just nicely inside the valve. This valve is open, therefore I can't get it in. This valve is off. I should be able to, with some drag, get it to slip in and out. And how I do that is there's adjusting nuts on the lifters. They are a mechanical lifter. Now these 2 little tools, I have actually taken them and taken a grinder, and I have ground these narrower because I have to have 2 to 3 wrenches in here to adjust, and it gets really tight in this small area. Not as bad on this Junior 4 as the Buchanan midget that I did right before it, but we've custom made a couple of little wrenches for doing the adjustments. And how I would do is I would lock the lifter and then I would adjust accordingly. Now these are all locked down so they're tight, but I would move this until I get the proper amount of clearance, and I'll pick a valve that's all the way down, and then I would adjust, and I would keep testing this 2 or 3 times, because as I lock these down they do have a tendency to move a little bit, so you end up checking them 4 and 5 times each go. Once I have it set, I usually take the paint pen or the marker and I mark that valve, and generally on a 4-cylinder, when I adjust the camshaft to get the lobes down, there'll be 2 valves that I can do at a time. So as I go through the sequence, I can do 2 valves, move the cam, do 2 valves, move the cam. So that is the basics. There's not a lot of tools required for this. It's more about patience, taking the time to get it right. I'm very fortunate in this build. New valve springs, new valves, lifters are rebuilt, new camshaft, so we're going through the motions with a lot of new pieces, but it's the same process if you're using original valves. We just, like I said, we're fortunate in this build. We're trying to use up as many new parts as possible while they're still available. Anyways, this is how I did the valve set and installation on this Junior 4 and the Buchanan midget. This is the Buchanan midget that I just started doing the assembly on. We got the valve train in yesterday and set the valves. Camshaft is installed. The idler bearing is installed. We now have the pistons hung, rings on, bearings are ready. Our next step is to install the crankshaft and the pistons, but before I do that, this is one of the blocks that came back from a line bore, and they did not generate a oil groove in the bearing surface, so we are actually going to use a mill end bit in the drill press, and we're going to mill our own oil grooves. I'm just going to do a little handheld walk around it here for you. I do have a video of this thing running today, and I did run it yesterday as well, but as you can see, everything has been redone. It does have our custom red paint on the Chrysler. Things have been polished, and again, this thing is running 6 volt and has had a full restoration done to it. I hope the customer gets many years of enjoyment out of this. Here's another one of our late model builds. This is a 2008 Volvo Penta 3-liter. Customer unfortunately purchased an engine last year and they had problems with it and never did resolve the issues, so he's elected to come to us. I happen to have a 3-liter in inventory on the shelf, which is the one on the right. So essentially on Monday, Eric's going to transfer over all of his pulleys and alternators and manifold and carburetor and bell housing, and we're going to take all of the pieces off the customer's engine on the left and put them on our rebuilt motor on the right. Then we'll test fire this, set timing, make sure everything's good, and when the customer picks it up, it will be turnkey ready to bolt in his boat. A good alternative and a good job in between our vintage productions. Quick little shot here of a Volvo Penta 3-liter that we used one of our existing long blocks and converted all the customers' accessories over on. We did a test run on this yesterday. I've just brought it back in the shop. We're going to do another fire up today, and then we'll probably do a quick oil change and get it ready for delivery. Here's the customer's core exchange engine. We had an opportunity to get it tore down right away, take a look and assess it. We're in good shape, no cores were broken or cracked, but this will now just turn around right in the upswing and we'll start building. The engine kit will be here today. So all the parts are going through the parts washer, which is sitting there behind it, the big red. If I can pan up here, that's our parts washer, so all of the parts will go through and get cleaned, and then we will build on the shelf there. You can see the red parts in the background. They are part of this engine core, and all of those will go through the cleaning tank and go in process, and when the engine kit comes we will start a build on it. In the lathe we have the crankshaft out of the 3-liter Volvo. We will polish this with the crank polisher, and then we'll do some measurements on it and see if it will need to go out for grind or if it'll go straight as it is polished. We will, once it's out of here, we will put it on the V-blocks and put a dial indicator on it and make sure that it is not bent, but it shouldn't be. This engine had not failed and blown up. It had a head gasket issue, and the customer elected, due to some previous issues with the motor, just to do an exchange so that he could enjoy his boating season this year. So we have no expectations that we'll run into any failures in the core components. And if I swing around here past the current 3-liter here, that is the crank polisher right there, sitting on top of the crankshaft that just came back for the Buchanan Junior 4. Okay, here we have a Chrysler Crown that we've done a twin carb manifold conversion on, as well as a complete rebuild. It's bored 20 over, all new bearings, all new valves, new keepers, new springs, the full deal. We were into the transmission, carbs were done, starter, generator, water pump, distributor, electronic conversion, the full deal, full restoration package on this. Anyways, I thought it might be kind of cool before we take this out and do a full mock-up on water. We just do a little quick fire up in the shop. I'll try to stay out of the way, but I'm going to just reach over and give this thing a quick tickle with the starter button. Okay, so we're going to go hot wire and there you go. A little bit of fun. That's always one of the fun parts. Next we'll get it out, hook it up to the water, get this thing plumb and circulating, doing what it's supposed to do, and set the timing 100% and get the carburetors dialed in. Okay, here we have a Chrysler Crown twin carb that we have set the boring bar up on. It wouldn't fit in the stand behind it due to height, so we have moved the boring bar and locked it down on top of the block, portable style. We put a sleeve in this block. There was a slight crack from a valve over to the cylinder, so we stitched it and then pushed the sleeve in, and now I'm boring the sleeve out to the size I need for the new pistons. Then I will fit the remaining as well. It will eventually have to go into the hone here for the finish in the crosshatch, but when it won't fit in the boring bar stand, this is how you do it. We have a freshly machined or decked block here, so we have a fantastic surface. I'm just sending it at slightly over the size of the current dimension of the sleeve, just to make sure that we're square and true all the way to the bottom. So far so good. We're halfway there or more, and everything looks good. And then I can start ramping up to take some material out to get this to the piston size. We should be in assembly by the end of the week, as the valve job's been done. So all new guides in there. You can see that the seats have been cut and they have been lapped, and over here are the valves, all new valves. There's some new keepers there, and like I said, we're getting in a good position. This thing will go through the machining phases, and hopefully by the end of the week we'll be in assembly. The transmission's already rebuilt, crank has been polished, cam is back from the regrinders, head's already been through the broach and machine. All the parts are washed and cleaned on the stand. So like you say, one step at a time, but right now we're trying to get the block machining all finished up, so that by the end of the week I can wash everything and prep it for assembly. Okay, Chrysler Crown rebuild. As you can see, we have the valves in. They're all new valves. Just getting the main bearings set up in here. Camshaft has been reground. It's all good to go. And then over here, we are lined up. Rings are on, bearings are on, everything's numbered and in order. We are just wrapping up here, ready to install the crankshaft. Okay, connecting power. Throttle.